You're welcome to this IELTS webinar. So today we're going to be discussing the IELTS test. Now in this webinar we're going to be discussing what the IELTS test is and what the IELTS test is not. In this webinar we have our outline. First of all, we'll look at what the IELTS test is. We'll look at who needs the IELTS test. Why would one even need the IELTS test? What are the IELTS test type to expect? Which of the tests you are to take, and what modules do we have in the test? Then we'll discuss the speaking, we'll discuss the listening, we'll discuss the reading, we'll discuss the writing, and then at the end of this webinar, I would tell you something. I would present an offer to you. I'll tell you how you can join our premium classes. So let's get started. So the first thing is, one, what is the IELTS test? Sorry, that's the first one is supposed to be what is the IELTS test. Now, the IELTS test number one is IELTS, is short for International English Language Testing System. It's a test. It's a testing system. They're basically checking your proficiency in the English language, how well you can use the English language in certain occasions, how well you can use the English language. So the test is a proficiency test. It is not a test of knowledge. The IELTS test is a proficiency test, and I want you to know this. The test is basically a kind of a proficiency test that tests how well you can use the language. Now, not how well you know the language. I don't know if that makes sense to us, but then I'll try to break it down. How well you can use the language, not how well you know the language. That might sound somehow. Now, let me put it this way. Now, for instance, let's say I am an Edo guy, or I'm an Igbo guy, and then I want to check someone who is not an Igbo guy, and I want to test that person's ability to use the Igbo language. What I'll be looking at is, or will be, the 4 basic language skills, which are the listening, the reading, the writing, and the speaking. Now, I'll check if that person can listen to or can pay attention to a conversation in my language, the Igbo language. If that person can actually pick details from a conversation being had in the Igbo language, if that person can read a text in the Igbo language, if that person can speak or can communicate verbally in the Igbo language, and then if that person can actually write in the Igbo language, and then I will now bring or give an overall band score, an overall assessment of the person's ability in the Igbo language. Now, in the case of the IELTS test, what they check here is our own ability, the non-native speaker's ability to use the English language. Yes, you and I, Nigerians, you have Nigerians and other African countries that were colonized by the British. Yes, we have English as our lingua franca, or as an official language, or as a second language, but take note, it is not a first language. It is not our mother tongue, so we are considered non-native speakers of the English language. That is why the IELTS test is compulsory for us, because we are non-native speakers of the English language. So we have to take the IELTS test or any other English language proficiency test, maybe the IELTS, the TOEFL, the CELPIP, etc., to show that, oh, we can communicate in this language. We are non-native speakers of the English language. So that is the IELTS test for you. Now, another thing they said here is it's a proficiency test, basically. I think I've mentioned that. Then the last thing here is nobody fails the IELTS test. That might sound controversial. Why would I say nobody fails the IELTS test? Yes, like I have said, the IELTS is basically a proficiency test. Nobody fails the IELTS test. You don't actually fail a proficiency test. You only fail to meet up to a certain benchmark. So when next someone tells you you failed the IELTS test, so I can actually beat my chest to tell you, no, you did not fail the IELTS test. You only did not meet up to a certain benchmark. And that is what happens with the IELTS test and with any other proficiency test in any language. So that is away from, that is this. Then away from this, we would have the next one. Now, who needs to take the IELTS test? Now, everybody needs to take the IELTS test if you are a student that is looking to gain admission into a foreign university. Now, when I say foreign university, I mean universities in foreign countries where English is their native language. For instance, the US, the UK, New Zealand, Australia, and Canada. Now, in many instances, there have been other non-native speakers of the English language requiring the IELTS test of students. Now, this is basically to check the students' level of the English language. It is not like a requirement that is compulsory for you to get, but it's part of the admission document for any student. And that is it. Then the next one, a medical professional. Let's say you are a nurse, you are a doctor, seeking to work outside your home country, basically seeking to work outside Nigeria or outside of Africa. You're seeking to work outside of Africa and you are a medical professional. Maybe you want to work in the US or UK, you want to practice medicine. You're a doctor, you're a nurse. Now, you need the IELTS test as a requirement. Then a regular migrant, just like you and I, that are not professionals, not medical professionals, and our intention is not to attend any school. We're not looking for admission in any of these schools, but we just want to migrate. Maybe, for instance, I am seeking PR, that is permanent residence, in Canada. I need the IELTS test. You need the IELTS test in that case. Now, or I am a migrant worker trying to get a job in maybe the UK, US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, even Finland these days request for the IELTS test. So basically, the IELTS test is taken if you basically want to step out. The IELTS test and other proficiency tests, but in this case, we're focusing on the IELTS test. So if you basically want to step out, then you need the IELTS test. Are we together? Then, away from this, the next thing will now be, why do I really need to take the IELTS test? I have said this before. One of the reasons you want to take the IELTS test is because you fall into the category of you are a migrant worker, you are a medical professional, you are a student seeking to practice in a foreign country, and that's it. Then the next one is because it's a language proficiency test, it is required to travel to many countries. Many countries actually require to know whether you can communicate in their language. Then the next one, simply to check your ability to communicate in any given language, in this case, English. Some of us will actually take the IELTS test just to check our ability to communicate in the English language and nothing more. Then, away from that, the next thing will be, what are the type of the IELTS test that you should expect? Number one is the IELTS UKVI or the UKVI IELTS. Now, this UKVI stands for UK, United Kingdom's Visas and Immigration. Now, this test is required if you're planning to go to the UK to work, or you're planning. Sometimes some schools require this. Some schools request for this. Sometimes some schools, they just need the standard IELTS. Now, what is the difference between the standard IELTS and the IELTS UKVI? The difference is simple. The UKVI IELTS has an extra layer of security, and it has what we call the UKVI code or a UKVI number, which is basically like a tracking number to check the test, and that's the difference. Then we have the IELTS life skills, that's A1 and B2. The IELTS life skill A1 and B2 is actually taken by those who want to visit or who wants to relocate to meet their family member who is already settled in the United Kingdom. Now, this is the IELTS life skill is a special kind of test. Now, they said postscript, we have the first two are usually divided into academic and general training test. Now, the UKVI would have its own academic test and the general training test, and the academic is for, we'll talk about that much later. Then the standard would also have its own academic and its own general test. Then next, we have which type or module of the IELTS test are you expected to take. But before then, let's look at this. Now, the IELTS test usually have two modules. We have the academic test and we have the general training test. We have the academic test and the general training test. Now, the academic test is for those people that want to study, students basically, in any of the country. If you're going to UK to study, then you need the UKVI academic test, except your school did not require that, or except your school did not specify that they need the UKVI. Aside that, nothing. Then, the other one, the general training test, is for basic work application, your work visa and all. That is what you need the general training test for. Now, the next thing we would answer is the previous question. Which of the test type or module am I expected to take? Now, this completely depends on you as an individual. I don't know what your purpose of traveling is, but whatever it is, whatever your purpose of traveling is, then you are expected to act accordingly. If your purpose of traveling is let's say for instance, in a situation you're traveling to the UK to work as maybe a caregiver or as a teacher, but not as a medical practitioner or a medical professional, then you are expected to take the UKVI general test. If you're traveling to Canada to work as anything, you're not going there to study, then you are expected to take the standard IELTS general test. Then, what about you're going to the UK to work as a medical practitioner? You're basically taking the standard test, the standard IELTS academic test. You are a student, you want to go to the UK, you're taking the academic test, depending on what your school requested for. It could be standard, it could be the UKVI, depending on what your school requests for. So away from this, let's discuss the next thing. Now, okay, we've talked about this. Next, we have We've talked about this. Okay, now we have the part of the test. Now, the test, I mentioned earlier while I was trying to introduce this class that the IELTS is actually divided into speaking, listening, reading, and writing, if you recall. Now, except you're taking the life skill, then you come across speaking, reading, listening, and writing. If you're taking the life skill, then you come across just speaking and listening. That is not the discussion of this webinar. Now, away from this, let's talk about the speaking. Now, the speaking test is actually the easiest part of the IELTS test. This basically checks your ability to communicate with people using the English language. Now, to do well in this test, basically, pay attention to conversations, daily conversations you have with friends, family, and colleagues. As you're preparing for the test, you want to just use your communication, your daily communication with people as a tool to practicing for the IELTS speaking test. Then the next thing you would do best here, if you approach the test as a conversation rather than an interview. Now, I said the test is basically checking your conversational skill. That's all. You will do better here if you approach the test as a conversation rather than an interview. Does that make any sense? I think it does. Now, another thing, this speaking test is divided into 3 parts. Section 1, which basically it's a conversation. Let me just break it down now. This section 1 is a conversation. You ask me, I answer the question. The examiner asks you the question and then you provide answers to the question. Then the second part is what we'll call the cue card, where they'll give you a piece of paper and then you are asked to basically present a speech on the topic of discussion. Then the last part is what we'll call follow-up. And it is important to note that this test would only last 20 minutes. 20 minutes and nothing more, and then you're done. That's why I said it's the easiest part. Now, basic tips in the listening, in the speaking test, you want to pay attention, you want to have a clear mind. Now, I cannot emphasize having a clear mind enough when writing an exam. Most of us will know. You need to have a clear mind. If you don't have a clear mind, there's no way you can come out well in any exam you're writing. Have a clear mind, that's the first thing. Now, it is pointless. It is pointless to memorize answers to previous questions because you don't know what they're going to ask you. So there is absolutely no need to try to memorize answers to previous questions. Then, you want to avoid big and unfamiliar vocabulary. That word is difficult to pronounce. Big and unfamiliar vocabulary. Now, in essence, if you're a Nigerian, I guess you'll be able to relate to this. You want to avoid speaking like someone in the house that was previously in the House of Assembly. Is it House of Assembly? Abi National House of Representatives, yes, somewhere representing Edo, something. Now, you know what I'm talking about. You want to avoid speaking like him. You want to basically speak in a clear manner. If you notice, many people would be tempted to ask, this person talking, is it the IELTS that we used to hear that this person is dissecting like this? Well, it is important to note that using big and unfamiliar vocabulary will be challenging. Yes, it is important to use big words, big vocabularies. It is important to use them. But the test, like I said, it basically checks your communication skills. It basically checks your communication skills. And if you're speaking and then you are mistaking certain words that should not be, then what do you want someone to think of you? So it is important to simply speak simply and clearly in a way that your listener, your examiner we'll know that, oh, this person knows what they're doing, and that's basically it. Then the next one, use a range of grammatical structure. When we're talking about grammatical structure, we're talking about sentence types, sentence structure. You don't want to just simply use one sentence type, simple sentence that most people use, or use maybe declarative sentences all through. You can ask rhetorical questions, what I will call rhetorical questions. You can ask rhetorical questions and probably provide answers to them. Was he even expecting me to? Was James even expecting me to come while he was doing this? I don't think so. I don't think he was expecting me. So something like that. Now, the next thing, if you have an accent, it is important. This is very important. If you have an accent, you don't need to worry. That's the next thing, I think. That's the next thing here. If you have an accent, you don't need to worry. If you have an accent, this simply means that I usually don't want to call this an accent. It's something called mother tongue interference. Now, if you're from Anambra, Nnewi precisely, I am sure that you've heard someone saying, "Nah, give me the lice," instead of "bro" or "bros, can you give me the rice?" That person was trying to talk, or "I want to eat lice." Someone from Nnewi or Anambra, I don't know. Please, if you're from there, forgive me, no vex. I'm not going to again. But or you've heard someone from the south having the same challenge, saying something like someone from maybe Delta State, Edo State, instead of chop, they would have shop. Or instead of shop, they might have chop. Like they misplace those things. Now I'm basically talking about the L and the R factor, then the CH and the SH factor. If you have this in the test, you want to be very careful. But if you have any other one, like the people from the from the west would say honestly, the H factor, except there is an English word that replaces the word you're trying to say, and you said the English word. Maybe for instance, I want to visit the rake. You don't visit a rake, you use a rake to clear grass, I think. You don't visit a rake, you visit a lake. That, those are two English words, and that's where the problem would come from. That's where the problem would come from. Then, but if you have, maybe you say fearful instead of people, you won't have a problem because there's no English word like fearful. Take note of that. So that is not going to be a challenge like it would have been if you replace English words with English words. Then the next one, think about questions before attempting to answer them. Think about questions before attempting to answer them. When asked any question, take some seconds to digest it before you attempt to answer them. And that's it. Then the last one, avoid what we call discourse fillers in your speaking test. Avoid what we call discourse fillers. Discourse fillers are basic words that all of us will use. I am saying something, the next thing I'm like, avoid these little things, avoid these discourse fillers. This actually happens to people that actually speak very fast. So you want to actually calculate your speech so that your thoughts are not slower than your speech. Let your thought and your speech be at the same pace, or your thought faster than your speech, so that you would actually be able to say things as long as possible without you don't want that in your conversation. Then the next one is the listening. The IELTS listening test is actually a straightforward one. It's another easy one. But there's a challenge. Many of us Africans, many of us Nigerians, we don't pay attention to certain things. We don't pay attention to certain things. Now, this part of the test is quite easy. Is seriously quite easy, although this will test your ability to pay attention to details in a conversation that has nothing to do with you. It will check your ability to pay attention to details in such a conversation. In such a conversation, your ability to pay attention to details will be checked in that conversation. Now, in that conversation, you want to be very careful with the accent. Okay, I guess we'll talk about this later. Let's discuss the structure of the test first. Now, the test is divided into 4 sections with a total of 40 questions. That's 10 questions per section. And the test would usually take between 25 to 40 minutes. Now, what tips can you apply here? The first thing, I said something earlier, have a clear mind. I cannot overemphasize having a clear mind. I cannot overemphasize this. Having a clear mind is so important as even booking to write the test. It's so important as even booking to write the test. So please take note of that. Have a clear mind always in the exam. Then prepare to multitask. Now this is because you're going to listen, you're going to analyze, and you're going to write down at the same time that the audio is playing. You're going to listen, you're going to analyze, and you're going to write down at the same time that the audio is playing. So for some people it might be difficult. For some people it might be difficult, but for many people it's easy. You're basically paying attention to details in the conversation and then transferring things from that conversation to your answer sheet, and that's it. Prepare to multitask. Be prepared to multitask. Then pay close attention to the audio being played. It is important because it is from that audio that you get your answer. So pay close attention to the audio. Now, take note of instructions. Take instructions and spellings seriously. I think there's a reason the manufacturers of the iPhone, that's Apple, no longer add a manual to the carton or to the packaging of their phone. I think there's a reason for that. And that reason is we don't like reading instructions. Humans, we don't like reading instructions. Now, please, in the IELTS test, in the IELTS listening and reading, please pay attention to instructions. It is very important. Pay attention to instructions. It is very, very important. In fact, permit me to say that paying attention to instructions is actually a vital part of the test, of the listening and reading test in the IELTS. Now, spellings. Because of a minor spelling error, there's a possibility you get an answer that you'd hitherto have gotten correctly, you get it wrong. You heard it clearly, but because of a minor spelling mistake, such as not dotting your I, not even misplacing the positions of the I in receive, but not dotting your I is also a major spelling mistake that would make you miss 1 mark. So that's why I would always tell my students that whenever you're writing the IELTS test, please present your answers in capital letters. So that's it. Then the next one, skip any answers that you're not sure of. For now, skip any answers that you're not sure of. You'll come back to fill in anything. Then familiarize yourself with a variety of accents. There's the British accent, there's the American accent, there's the Australian accent, there's the Canadian accent, there is the Irish accent, there's the Scottish accent. There are several accents in the English language. So you don't know which one will come. For me, I can beat my chest that, oh, somehow I proudly do not understand the Scottish accent. Somehow I can beat my chest to that. Now, if I am taking the IELTS test, the first thing I want to do is, because I don't understand the Scottish accent on a regular basis, I always practice the test. I always practice the accent. I always look for how I can get this accent to practice with them, and then familiarize myself with them. So that's it about the listening. Then next, let's go to the next one. We have the reading. Now, the reading test, this is another module of the IELTS test, or this is another part of the IELTS test that checks your ability to read, understand, and interpret, or your ability to understand and interpret a given text. Now, I have a sample somewhere, but I can't show you my screen. I can show you another screen of this one. So I'll do that in subsequent videos. Okay. Now, it is important to note that the IELTS reading checks basically your comprehension skills, your ability to understand and interpret any given passage, your ability to read, understand, and interpret. Now, there is no way you can read and interpret. You must read, understand, and interpret a given passage before anything. This test is going to be divided into 3 parts, which will last 1 hour, and then you'd have a total of 40 questions. 3 long passages or more than 3 long passages. But in all, you'd have a total of 40 questions, and it's going to be in 3 sections. And all of them, you're expected to spend 1 hour. Now, for the basic technique, let's see. Number 1, have a clear mind. Number 2, timing is important. The time factor is very important. Try as much as you can. You want to try as much as you can to keep up with the time. Then next, pay attention to instructions. I think I said something like this previously. Pay attention to instructions. Then avoid panic. I think this is applicable to every part of the IELTS test. Avoid panic. Don't fear. Don't be scared. Avoid panic. Then the next one, it is basically a vocabulary test. So there's a possibility that you not understand every word. Now, one thing you want to do for me and for yourself is, as long as you are taking the reading test, try as much as possible to understand meaning. Understanding meaning is as important as even understanding the answers to the question. Understanding meaning is as important as understanding the answers to the question, or as important as providing answers to the question. Then, there are several questions. There are 2 categories of questions that you'd come across in the reading test. These 2 categories include 1, questions that follow order, and 2, questions that do not follow order. Now, the questions that follow order, they are called that name because these categories are actually named that, or actually named such, for several reasons. One reason being the fact, or for one reason basically, let's leave it at one reason. Because if I were to separate it, I'll still give one reason. It's still one reason I'll end up giving. So let's just leave it at one reason. Now, it's actually named such because of one reason, and that reason is the fact that certain questions in the reading text actually follow an orderly arrangement. That's why they are called questions that follow order and questions that do not follow order. The true, false, not given, yes, no, not given, multiple choice questions, short answer questions, sentence completion question, diagram completion questions, table completion question, note completion questions, flowchart completion questions. All these questions, when you come across them, they actually follow a particular order of arrangement. That is to say, the point you find the answer to question 1, let's say you found the answer to the first question in, let's say, something like paragraph 2. It then means that for the true, false, not given, yes, no, not given, multiple choice questions down to the flowchart completion questions, it then means that the answer to the next question will only fall below that point. To fall below that point. Then the next one will fall below that. The next one will fall below that. So they actually follow a serial order of arrangement. And nothing more. It follows a serial order of arrangement and nothing more. Nothing more, nothing less. Are we together? Great. Now, the next one, we have the questions that do not follow order. This name, they are named such. They are named such because of the singular reason that they are opposite of the previous questions. And that's it about this webinar. But before we call it a day, before we draw the curtains here, I would like to say that, did you notice I didn't talk about the writing? And that's because the writing is more complex than all this. The listening, the reading, the write, the speaking, if you're doing the academic test and you're doing the general test, they are you basically use the same format. They basically use the same format in the questions, but not the same questions. They basically use the same format, but not the same. They basically use the same format, but not the same questions. But for the writing is divided into task 1 and task 2. The task 1 for the academic is the task 1 for the academic is a report, and then the task 2 is an essay. While for the general, those people taking the general test, the task 1 is a letter and the task 2 is an essay. So if we're going to be discussing those here, it's going to be quite long. So that's why I would enjoin us to join our premium training, where we'll be discussing everything in clear detail. We'll be discussing everything about the IELTS test in clear detail, as this would help you to ace the test in one sitting. Now, this is what I have for you. This is what I have for you now. If you're joining the training from this video, there will be a link around this video. If you're joining the training through a link around this video, then you're going to be paying 20, is that 20%? Yes, you're going to be paying 20, no, that's not 20%. I think that's 40%. You're going to be having 40% off, yes. And instead of 50,000, the regular 50,000, you'll be paying 30,000. I think, yes, that's 40% off. It's fair enough. So act fast and join the training. So see you on the other side of the training. Have a lovely day.